What's going on, everybody? Got a super cool tutorial for you today. We're actually going to be working with the Xbox 360 Fat and the hard drive, the special one that they made to stick on the top of the console. So we're actually going to be taking this and making it look a little bit more like this. As you can see, we're going to do a window mod to the case. With some plexiglass. We're going to put LEDs inside of it, a lot of different colors as well. We're going to talk about the hard drive too, the actual hard drive itself. We're going to talk about upgrading it, what your options are, because there's kind of some funky stuff about these hard drives that makes it difficult to upgrade it. So we're going to address that too later on in the video. This is basically going to be a full video where I'm going to show you pretty much everything. I'm going to show you how to cut this, how to do the LED kit, essentially from start to finish how to do this entire project. So a few things just to get started. There will be a few points in this video where I have to explain some things because if you run into issues, you need to know how these things work. That way you can fix it on the fly. You know, if you install something weird and you need to fix it. The LED kit. The way I've designed the LED kit is so that it can be done without soldering at all. So you're actually going to be able to do the soldering, do the LEDs with no soldering iron, nothing. Now there are going to be some footnotes with that, and that's what I mean. There's going to be some explaining because there are better ways to make the LED kit than the way I'm going to show you in this video. But the point is it's going to really be beneficial for people that aren't comfortable with soldering. A lot of people, as soon as they hear soldering, they turn off and turn away. So that's going to be one of the cool things about it is you're going to be able to do this without having to solder at all. Your biggest thing is going to be your case itself, because we are going to be obviously cutting out the case, and that's going to require a Dremel tool, and that's going to be something a lot of people may not have access to or feel comfortable doing. So just like all my other mod kits and stuff like that that I offer, in the description of this video, I'm going to put a few links, and there's going to be a few options to help you if you're not comfortable doing parts of it. For instance, the finished kit where it's in kit form, where it's just going to have like the shell, your LED kit finished up, and then you kind of finish assembling it, and you can put your own hard drive in it. That way you've got the window mod. There's going to be a link to that. And there's going to be a link even in this particular case I'm going to offer too, where this entire thing will be totally done for you. All you'll have to do is just, plop it in the top of your console and you're done. So that option is going to be here for this particular one as well. But again, I'm going to show you how to do all this so you don't have to buy anything. That's not my thing. I like to teach people how to do it all themselves. I just offer it. That's why I offer the kits too. That way, if there's some parts that are a little bit too much for some people, they can still do the modifications, and that's kind of how I do things here. So first and foremost, we're going to get started with our case. So in just a second, I'm going to switch over to my cutting area, get my camera moved over, and then we're going to talk about actually getting it cut. After that, we're going to talk about getting the plexiglass and getting that installed. At some point, we'll talk about the hard drives, as well as moving on to the LED kit. Maybe flip that order. Haven't decided yet. But yeah, so let's dig into it. I'm going to move over to the cutting station, and we'll start talking about the window itself. Okay, guys, so we're here in my cutting station now. I've moved over, and we're going to start working on the case itself. Now, one thing I wanted to add real quick, as you can see, I've already got everything disassembled. Originally, I was going to cover that in this video, but I realize there's a lot of people that are probably trying to figure out how to open it, and just get into it and don't really want to custom build their own. So because of that, I actually split the opening and disassembly tutorial in a separate video. So check the description if you need to go through how to get your hard drive apart and get it to this point, because I've already covered that in that one. And like I said, just check the description. That very first link is going to be to that video. It's a real quick video. You'll be able to get this thing popped out. It talks about the tools you'll need and stuff like that. So once you're there, you can come back and then we can start on the case. All right, so the case. First thing we're going to do is we've got to make a few modifications. what we're going to do is we've just got our top shell here, and it doesn't matter which one you're working with. They all work the same, but essentially this outer edge or rim can be taken off. The way it works is there's a pin in here that kind of goes in. So what we can do is we can take this and push it outward and then pop it up. And then we're going to push outwards and pop it up. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. There we go. So now we've got this thing out. Now this is just going to make it easier. You could cut this when you do the dremeling. Problem is it's still going to be out too far, so you still want to just go ahead and trim it. It's going to make it a lot easier. To do that, you're going to need a cutter like this. This is like a flat flush cutter. So as you can see, like on one edge, it's completely flat. And then, you know, it's got the whole hard cutter thing going on. Don't get this confused with like a metal stripper or something. Those are not going to get you what you want, but you definitely want some sort of flush cutter. Now you can use a lot of different things, but this plastic is pretty thick. In addition to this, if you don't have one, you could go ahead and just cut this off with your Dremel tool, because obviously you're going to need that already for the case. I just think it's a lot easier to use one of these. Now, on each end of this center support part, we're going to leave the two holes. So you'll see there's a hole, like a slot here and a slot here. We're going to leave those. We want to cut right before those to get this center piece out. So we're just going to make little cuts right there. One on the other side. And remember, so these can be brittle sometimes, especially the gray ones. So you just want to don't like put too much force for cutting. Just cut it in little pieces, little strips at a time. That way you don't break it out too much. And this isn't like a super important support structure on the side there. It's just nice to have a little extra bracing where those two slots are. So you want to keep them intact if you can. But in reality, you can cut those out if you really need to. All right, so now we've got that done. We're going to actually put this back on for our Dremel cutting. And it's just the reverse way. You're just kind of sticking these little things back in their slots. And you just want to go around the side and make sure everything's on there all the way. This one's not. There we go. Okay, we're putting that back on because it gives extra support for when we're doing our Dremel cutting. All right, so I'm going to get those out of our way. And we'll talk about our Dremel for just a second. Well, I've got the camera cord wrapped around it. Okay, so this is the Dremel tool I'm using. Any of them are going to be good. And really what this is a rotary tool. So if you have like a scale rotary tool or something like that, that will work too if you have the correct attachments. But really the Dremel tool, because of its size and its weight and its power, is really the perfect tool to do case cutting. You know, even if you use some other type of rotary tool, those are usually bigger, heavier, just not as well built. As you can see, mine's pretty worn here. I've had this one for, I don't even remember how long at this point. So this is the tool you're really going to want to use. If you use another one too, you'll have to keep in mind that some of the attachments that I talk about are not going to work quite the same. So you're going to kind of have to improvise based on what you have. So again, that's why I highly recommend you do this with a Dremel. And that's also why, like I talked about earlier in the description, you can find the kit form of this where it's got the window done for you. Because I know that buying a whole Dremel or even doing the cutting itself is a little daunting for some people. So yeah, just keep that in mind. The other thing I'm going to talk about is this guy right here. This is the cutting board attachment for the Dremel. This is going to give it a nice, quick, easy, flat surface to cut on, and so that's really important. I would not do it without it because this is just going to jerk around so much without this attachment that, yeah, I mean, you're going to screw something up. Then we just have our standard cutting bit. You can find these, I mean, everywhere. This is just the little standard cutting bit. There's nothing special about it. It'll cut through this plastic just fine. So you're just going to have that and this. And then we screw it on our end here to get our flat surface. Now, one thing that we want to double check, you do have a gauge on the side here. You don't want that to be sticking out too far because you'll cut into the material underneath this because, you know, this isn't very thick. So you want to make sure you adjust, and luckily this adjusts, you know, up and down as much as you want it. So we only need about as much bit out as we actually need to get through the material. So what we're going to actually do, you could make the window bigger, but once you go too far out to the edges, you're going to run into issues with parts that are in the case, and you'll see more about that later because we still have to make a few more modifications to the case. So I wouldn't do it too much bigger. Maybe you can go a little bit wider with the window, but really we're just going to keep with this bezel. We're going to essentially cut this whole bezel out and use that for our template too for the window. It's just a quick, easy way so you don't have to do any marking on it. Yeah, it stays small enough where some of the stuff you want to keep hidden, like the wires and stuff like that, especially for the LED kit, can stay hidden and not visible. So yeah, that's what I would suggest. So all we're going to do is we're just going to plunge the bit down in. We're going to cut it out. We're not going to worry too awfully much about how clean and perfect it is because we're going to come back with a sanding attachment after this step, and we're going to clean up the edge and get it smoothed out and straightened up. And then we'll hit it with sandpaper too for our very last step to get that final touch. So we're just trying to make sure we don't accidentally let it ride too far in and out to screw up the line. We're just trying to get the big chunk out here in the middle, and then we'll clean it up. One thing to add real quick halfway through this cut, this is the kind right here that I'm talking about. I don't care about this because I'm going to be painting this, but it's usually the kind with the silver edges. This gray actually has a shiny finish on it, where the other ones it's just the raw plastic without an extra finish. So make sure you're knocking your dust off enough and stuff like that to make sure you're getting all the dust out of the way, because it will scratch the finish, and there's not going to be much you can do about that. Once it's really, really, really scratched, like this one kind of already was, you can't buff that out or anything. So just keep that in mind while you're cutting. Okay, so we got that out, popped right out. You can see this isn't what I would call a even cut. It's kind of uneven. I'm just trying to get it as close as possible because that sander's going to do the rest of the work for us. Well, it's going to do that part of the work. So we're going to remove our attachment, and then we're going to get our cutting bit out of there because we're going to switch over to one of the cylinder sanding attachments. Now, real quick, there's two different sizes, and I want to make sure that you got the right size. So when you go find these yourself, there's actually two sizes. There's the small one and the big one. We're using the big one. The small one, it's a lot easier to dig into the plastic on accident. The bigger one with the larger surface area just allows for less mistakes. All right, so we're just getting that in there. Okay. So now all we're doing is cleaning this up. When I did the cut, I cut on the inside of the line for the bezel, but as you can see right here, it kind of went in a little bit, so I'm going to have to get all that cleaned up. And we're just cleaning up the lines. We're going to sand it to the bezel line, the mark line that we're going to cut it to, and that will clean up the edges as well as fill it all the way out and get it even. Okay, so as you can see, we've got it way more cleaned up than before, but it's still not perfect. Um, you'll see there's still a little bit of wavy lines. In fact, I'm going to clean that one up just. So on these cuts now, you'll see it's a lot more cleaned up. All the jaggedness is out. It's the full shape, but there's still some kind of rough edges here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little sanding trick that I'm going to show you to clean it up, because it's really hard to get everything like 100% perfect. You know, I mean, unless you have the steadiest hand in the world or something, like, yeah, it's not going to be very easy to keep these lines 100% perfect. But there's a trick that you can use with a piece of sandpaper. Okay, so what we're doing now is I've got me a little piece of sandpaper. I'm using the 120 grit. There's a little trick you can use to getting these last little bit of edges cleaned up and getting those lines looking pretty much perfect. So what we're going to do is not only are we going to sand, you know, this flat edge on the inside, we're also going to sand the corner. So we're sanding like this, and we're going to sand like this because we want to round that corner on the top. And what that's going to do is it's going to even out the flat edge and smooth it up and give it a much straighter look to it, so any little tiny imperfections in the cut won't show. As you can see, I'm sanding on the flat edge, and then as I'm going, I'm kind of rolling it over so we can get like the rolled over edge, and that's going to really make that line look nice and clean. Now the one thing is, be careful, don't go too far, because if you lay the whole thing flat, you're sanding the finish off, you know, and you're leaving scratches on the top. So we're just kind of going like this. And then we're going to follow it all the way around. Here in the corner, you can just use your finger, kind of get it like this. Use that for the inside, and then you can still kind of lean it to roll the corner over a little bit. Okay. So now, and hopefully the camera does it justice, the difference is going to be hard to show on the camera. But now we've ran it over the edges, so this shape is nice and clean, nice and flat. All the lines look, you know, nice and perfect, without having to be obsessive when you're cutting, because you know, sandpaper just cleans that up. Now, we're not quite done with the case yet. We've got to make some more modifications to it. So we're going to get our flush cutters back out again. Because there's a few things out of here we want to cut out. First of all, there's these like notch things back here. We need to get those clipped out because we need to get it all the way flush with the rest of this surface, which means totally flat. Okay, so we've got that cleaned up. You see now all that's out. Now it's nice and flat. We want to kind of trim right here on the edge. And again, this is why it's so important you get flush cutters, because without these the flush side on it, you wouldn't be able to get these cuts. Okay, so we got that out. That's nice and clean. We're cutting that out because our plexiglass has to be able to get up in there when we install that. You're also going to take, you see you've got 3 pegs here. You want to leave the big middle one and the one that's right here on the far end, but you want to snip this one out. We're going to need that extra little bit of room to mount the LED connection stuff in there and have room for it. And then if you look right here, you've also got these 2 kind of ridges. We just want to get those clipped and get those flush. And yes, it is important that we get these nice and clean and flush like this, because we have very low clearance in here. And the next step when we talk about the plexiglass, I'm going to have to talk about that as well, because you have to make sure you get a thin enough plexiglass so that everything will fit. So getting all this flush and everything. Oh, I don't rip my glove. I guess it don't matter right now. Keep getting this nice and flush. is really important to make sure you have the right clearance. Besides that, now we're done with this part. We're going to move on to getting our plexiglass installed. And so we're going to go back over to my main table and go from there. Okay, guys, so we're here back on my regular work table. We've got our case that's totally done, and we're going to start working on the plexiglass. So a couple quick things that we should address about the plexiglass first. First and foremost, we're going to need a way to cut it. You're not going to be able to find one that's small enough, small enough to just fit in here without any cutting. So we need some sort of score tool. You actually can use the Dremel that we just used to cut this, but the Dremel and plexiglass is kind of iffy, especially depending on the type of material that's used for it. It can crack and splinter it real bad, and so I don't typically like using that when we're dealing with plexiglass, but you can. Otherwise, you can use something like this. This is just actually like a score tool that you just mark, and then you bend and crack it, which will, go through and show that here. The other thing about the plexiglass is, for this one in particular, you have to be real careful about the thickness. The max thickness you need to get is 1/16 of an inch. You will see some that are labeled as more like 3/32 of an inch, which is a little bit bigger. That's still going to be too thick. You're going to want something 1/16 of an inch or thinner, because anything more than that, and you're going to have a real tough time getting all your LEDs and the hard drive packed in here, along with the thickness of that plexiglass itself. Lastly, to attach it in any other situation, when we're dealing with a case mod, I always use double-sided foam tape. And the reason for that is that the heat that's generated in a game console can cause hot glue to melt. But in this case, we're not going to be as worried about that. Now, the hard drive does generate a little bit of warmth, but it's nowhere near the temperatures needed to soften up hot glue. And the hot glue is actually going to be better because, again, it's going to be able to smush down pretty flat. And so we're going to, gain a little bit more clearance using hot glue versus double sticky tape. Now, you could try it, but again, every little thing you do that makes it thicker in here is going to make it harder to get everything reassembled. So we want to keep it as low profile as we can. So first things first, I've got my piece of plexiglass here, and we're going to mark it. So this is just a really big piece. You could probably get a piece that's like 8 by 10 inches, about the sheet of a piece of paper, roughly. That's going to be more like what you get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark it. Now, usually these have films on both sides, so it's okay to mark on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly, well, if I can hold it still, just going to lightly do that. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it still has to obviously be bigger than the hole itself. We just want to do that to make it easier to cut. So as you can see, I left a little gap here. So all we're going to do is we're just going to score this way and this way. We might have to actually score it all the way down so that we can bust it this way. But we want to leave a little bit of room here because remember there needs to be some overlap so that it goes past the actual case mod hole. So we're going to just do this. All you do is you're just scoring it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to keep going over it multiple times, and each time you're going a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And that's actually pretty far through, so I don't think I need to cut anymore. So then what we do is we can bend it. We'll use that same cutter and slice through the back film to separate it. And then we're going to do the same thing just right here on the smaller side. Again, just leaving ourselves a little bit of room. Then we can bend it. And we're left with this piece. Now, you have to choose which end you want this to go on. So we're going to put it in here. And what we're going to do is on this side, the side where we had to remove all those little things, we need to cut the corners off as well so that it can get around the screw holes and the supports. So we're going to just do like that, just to kind of mark where we want to cut. Then we're just going to score it. And then we're going to take a pair of pliers. We can bend that corner off. Just like that. So now we're going to test it, and you'll see it should sit down in there just fine. It should clear everything now that we got the corners out. So what we're going to do is we're going to preheat our glue gun and get it ready to start using, and then we can actually install this. Okay, once your hot glue gun has got done heating, we're going to get this ready by taking the films off of each side. So we can just get that done out of the way. Put it somewhere where there's not any debris or anything that will scratch it up. Now you don't want to put too much glue, because if you really squirt the glue in there heavy, it'll squeeze out. So we're putting kind of a thin layer here. And we're just going to put one line on each long side. And obviously we don't have much time, so we want to get this put on there as soon as possible. Now, one thing to address, you'll notice I just put one strip on each side. The reason for that is not putting glue on this side and this side will allow it to be a kind of vent. If you remember earlier, I said the hard drive does create a tiny bit of heat. It's just not much. But actually, if you look back at the piece that you cut out of this thing, there's actually little holes, and you see that these are actually meant to be little vents just so air can come, get out freely. This, leaving that glue off of each end, is going to kind of create the same effect. It's going to let air pass through freely, so we're not losing any heat dissipation with this modification. We're going to let that dry and set it aside, because that's pretty much it for the case part minus the final assembly. Okay, so now you see I've got some new supplies out here because we're going to start dealing with the LED kit. Now, first thing is I need to address a couple of things. If you remember in the beginning of the video, I did say something to the effect that what we're doing here is not technically the best way to make one of these LED kits. My whole goal here is to make this as easy for anyone to do it, not just people that already know how to solder and have soldering tools and stuff like that. So my biggest thing was I want to be able to make this LED kit and light it up on the inside with no soldering. So that's the great part about it, is that you won't need a soldering iron, and there's no like cheap tricks or anything either. We're just going to use some DIY connectors here that you can find as well, and we'll go over all that in just a second. But regardless, it's still not the best way to do it. So if you do have a soldering iron and you've done some soldering, you can follow this step almost to a T exactly like we do, but instead of the connectors like these, you'll just be doing direct soldering onto the wires. So moving on, let's talk about the actual supplies we need. Now, these are LED wire connectors, two-sided. So there's two-sided, there's one on each side, and you'll see how that works in just a second. These are 6 inches, and these are 8 millimeter. You will more than likely have an 8 millimeter wide LED strip, so you want to get 8 millimeter connectors. Okay, next thing is we have something, and this is the part that I think some people would not like the most, and why I'm giving you that disclaimer. Some people call these vamp clamps. You actually see them in a lot of different applications. Speakers, cars, wiring. There's all kinds of different things where these type of connectors are used. And so using these does create a little bit more resistance and stuff like that, so you lose a little bit as far as your amps. But luckily we're not using that many to begin with. The second thing too is it's just a better connection if we're soldering. You know, it's just a better setup to solder it. But again, the whole point of this is to get people to, you know, be able to make this even if they don't have one. And again, if you want something a little bit better and stuff, or you know, still not quite sure about this part of it, again, you can check the description as I've mentioned before, and you can find this in the kit form, so that most of this part is already done for you. So moving on now to the LEDs themselves. Unlike most case mods and most of my tutorials with case mods, we're actually dealing with a 5-volt source here instead of a 12-volt. So you've actually got to be really careful with your LEDs, because the vast majority that you're going to find are 12-volt. 5-volt are typically the type that are powered by USB cable. Maybe some of those kits, you know, you could put them in a TV. You just plug them in the USB port. You know, you've got LED lighting around your TV. But you can find strip rolls still. You just have to be very careful, because you don't want to get 50-50 size LEDs, because those are 10 millimeter wide strips. So they're wider than these, and they're also bigger. So again, less clearance inside to pack everything in. And it's been really rare where I've ever seen a 50-50 LED strip, or 10 millimeter, either way you want to look at it, to be an actual 5-volt. It's usually a 12-volt that has some sort of modification to kind of sort of work on 5-volt. So you just want to make sure you're getting actual DC 5-volt LEDs for this kit. Okay. Now again, all that's taken care of for you in the kit. So this, you know, this type of stuff isn't a big deal if you're just planning on getting that. So what we're going to do first is we're going to start working with this. This is your wire harness and your wire connector and your SATA connector for the inside. And we're actually going to be tapping off the wires in here and getting everything connected for the LEDs. So what we're going to do is first, this has got like a little tape thing on here, a label thing. We're just going to carefully cut this out of our way. And again, you want to be careful. Don't be slicing wires. I'm just lightly cutting it so I can peel that little tape sticker thing away. We're going to need that to get it spread out. And then the two wires we're going to be dealing with here are the yellow and black wire. So we've got these two right here. And we got those kind of separated. So first things first, what we're going to do, if you've got a 5-volt, you also want to try to get ones that are separated by individual LED. Some of these are sectioned into like sections of 3, so every 3 LEDs you can cut. If you have one of those, you could do 6 on each side for 12 total LEDs, but you're really going to be pushing your amps pretty far there, more than I'd like to push them. And having 6 LEDs on each part is going to be kind of long, so it's going to be hard to get it and mount it into that case properly and hide everything the way you need to. So try to find one where you can cut each LED off of the strip, because we're going to have 2 sections of 5. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to cut right on the line, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cut right on the line. So we got 10 LEDs total separated into 2 strips. And then with this part, it's actually super easy. So you've got your red and black wire here. We're going to keep red as our active and black as our ground. And all you're going to do is, all of these usually have a plus and a minus sign on the LED strip. So you're going to line those up, red with plus. Oh, and I've got a 10 millimeter here. Hold on. Had some 10 millimeters mixed in with my 8 millimeters, I guess. So we're going to open this up. They just kind of pop open with a little clamp on the side. And then we're going to insert plus on the red side, minus on the black side. Then we're going to close it. You don't want to put too much pressure, but just use a little bit of pressure just to make sure that's good and closed. Part of that pressure is how it holds everything together and makes a good connection. And then we're going to open the other LED connector we have, and we're going to do the same thing. Make sure we're putting red with red, red with positive, black with minus. There we go. And then as you can see, hopefully, it's going to be hard to get this to focus, but the LED strip is sliding underneath the 2 prongs, the 2 metal prongs. and they're touching the two contacts. Based on what LEDs you get, there may be two copper circles like that, or it may be just two copper lines, but it's the same concept no matter how it looks. So we're just going to close that. And now we can put this one on here because we want to leave one side. One end is going to stop at the LED. One end is going to stop with the connector because we're actually going to cut this last connector off that's not connected to an LED. We're going to cut it as close as we can and spread these wires. So it's going to look like this right here, where you've got two different sections split up by these wires, and now you've just got these wires. Now, these vamp clamps, as some people call them, there's an actual name for these, but one reason why people hate on these is they are a little bit iffy. You know, they're just scoring the wire, and so based on the wire size, sometimes it may not want to make a good connection. So what we're going to do is you can either use a pair of wire strippers, or you could just, you know, if you've done this a lot, you could just strip the ends off of each one of these. So we're just stripping the coating off to expose the wire. And then we're going to take each one and we're going to fold the exposed wire back down on the wire itself. And what that's going to do is that's going to have more wire to make a better connection on these, because sometimes, you know, they don't want to hit right. And it's usually because of the thickness of the wire is a little different and stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to start with our black wire. And all these do is they slip on there just like that. So you've got the black wire running through this side, and on the back side here there's another hole. And that's where we're going to take our black wire, because again it's connecting with the black wire on the actual hard drive connector. And you're going to stick it in that other hole. Now you're going to want to check everything, make sure everything's in there proper. Make sure nothing's misaligned. You know, sometimes the black wire can kind of come out a little bit. You just want to make sure it's in there properly. And then take a pair of pliers and you squeeze down so that you squish that metal piece there. And then you flip. Oh, ripped my gloves right off. Or a piece of them. And then all we're going to do is the same thing for the yellow wire. This one's going to be a little bit harder because you're getting a little packed in here with the first connector. And we're going to take a red wire, make sure that wire is still folded down on itself, and get it in that hole in the back. Get this lined up, make sure everything is good for the wires. There we go. Now, at this point, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to test this before we go any further. You're going to take your console and get it plugged in. And it's going to be hard to get the whole thing in there with the cord. So I'm going to try to get this side. So you're just plugging this in like this. And then we're going to plug in the console itself. And we're going to pop it on and make sure that our LEDs are on. And as you can see, these LEDs are on. We'll give them a little shake, called the shake, rattle, and roll, I guess. You just want to make sure that the connection is good. You want to make sure that while you're shaking it like this, that the lights aren't going on and off. Could mean you didn't quite make a good connection. Maybe the wire has popped out of these connectors like I talked about when we were clamping it all together. You just want to go back and check your connections if you've got some play or the lights are wanting to turn on and off. But if you've tested it and everything looks good, we could turn the console off and we can get ready to install the LED lights themselves into the case. Now, before we do that, we will be moving on and talking about the hard drive though. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our LED kit, going to kind of roll it up, and then we're going to come back and we're going to discuss. Most of the hard drive is going to be more of a discussion about what kind of hard drives you can use and stuff like that. So I'm going to come back with some of that stuff and we'll handle that section. Okay, guys, so now we're on to a boring part, I guess. I'm going to have to do some explaining here because we're going to be talking about the hard drives themselves. Um, Unfortunately, with the way Microsoft designed these, you're not going to be able to stick just any old hard drive in here and expect it to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss your options and what you can do as far as upgrading or changing the actual hard drive. So I'm assuming before we cut this open and everything that you had one with the actual hard drive inside. So obviously that hard drive is going to work, especially if you used it before and everything. I'm assuming that a lot of people want to upgrade this. Um, Maybe you've even got one that doesn't work very well. A lot of different reasons, but we're going to be limited here. So first and foremost, if you have a console that is either modified or you are planning to modify it, then that's going to open up your options a lot as far as what kind of hard drive you can use. Now, what I mean by a modified console, we're talking about a hard modded console that has a mod chip installed. We're usually talking about RGH, JTAG, stuff like that. If you have that already or you are going to do that in the future, then essentially any hard drive will work as long as it's the right size. If you have a modified console, the only thing you got to worry about is it's got to be a SATA 2.5-inch drive. It can be up to 2 terabytes technically. However, now I could be wrong on this. There could be some late model drives that were 2 terabytes, but all the 2 terabyte slim style models like these were only ever made in 1 gigabyte, because once you go up to 2 gigabytes, this gets a lot thicker because it just required too many plates. You couldn't keep it at such a thin form factor like you could at 1 gigabyte or below. So really, you're going to be limited to a 1 gigabyte in size for this one that goes inside of here, because of just the size itself. Now, I don't know. Like I said, there could have been hard drives I didn't know about that were this size and this thin that were 2 terabytes, but I've never seen one myself. I've never seen one for sale anywhere. Most of them are about, I'd say about like that, a little over twice as thick. And it just will not fit in here. Now, if you keep the console stock with no modifications, then you're going to be limited to original hard drives only. What I mean by that is the hard drive that's inside of this and any of these would work. And in total, there was 20 gigabyte, 60 gigabyte, and a 120 gigabyte model. So you could essentially get one of those and scalp the hard drive. So if you wanted to buy the 120 gigabyte, you could pop that one open, pull the 120 gigabyte out of it and use it. Or you could just simply buy a 120 gigabyte version of this before you do any modifications. And that way you just, you're planning on using the original hard drive that was originally inside of it. Those are really your only options as far as a stock modified console. And there's no workaround for this. Microsoft has a special encrypted partition on these that have a special code in the files that match this specific hard drive. So even if you found like a hard drive image online, that wouldn't work either, because that image is only going to work for whatever hard drive that came from. If you ever back up your hard drive, you will never be able to put that on another hard drive and have it work, because again, that partition is unique for each individual hard drive. So that's why you're limited to only original, authentic ones. So when you're going to buy these, if you're staying the stock route, try to find one with the seal intact. Now, just because the seal is broken does not mean it wouldn't work. Obviously, if they say that the hard drive was tested and it works, then you should be good to go. But if you're really worried about that, about it being an authentic original one, if you can find one that's still sealed, then you know for sure that you've got a good original hard drive inside of it. In these kits or these pre-made ones, you can get up to a 1 terabyte, and the ones in the links in the description. But again, even with those, the 1 terabyte is going to be limited for RGH or JTAG modified consoles. That's the only consoles that will be able to actually see the hard drive and then format it correctly so that you can use it. If you have a modified console, you just want to keep in mind that after you get done with these modifications, you will have to get to the stock Xbox 360 dashboard. So if you're running a custom dashboard like Aurora, you need to get to the stock dashboard and then go through the settings tab and the storage in the settings, and then that way you can format your hard drive for once you're using it for the first time. So just a little tip there for you if you're using the RGH. We can go to our final assembly stage, where we're going to take all the pieces that we've put together, and then we're going to assemble it and get it all put together looking nice. So we're going to come back with all our pieces and get started on that. All right, guys, so here we are. We've got all of our pieces. We've got the case. I've got my LED kit that we put together earlier over here, kind of off the camera, or I'll set it right there, I guess. We've got our hard drive, both case pieces, including the bottom. And I know that I talked about this at the very beginning, but we've removed all the shielding and stuff like that. We've already taken all the modifications and cut everything out to this. We've got our button system, which is the retraction arm here. We've got the button itself, which was any color depending on which one of these you're using. We've got our little rubber seal piece here. We've got our little spring. We've got our original 4 silver screws. These are the longer T6 screws. We are not going to use the smaller T10 black screws that were on the inside. We don't need that anymore. And then, of course, the hard drive and our kit. So we're going to put our little rubber seal in here. If you watch the video that's in the description about opening it, I talked about there's this little notch here. You want to make sure that notch is pointing up this way. That way it fits in there properly. Otherwise, it won't sit correctly. Then we're going to take our LED kit, and we're going to go ahead and just get this inserted a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect yet. This is really just so that we can install the rest of the LED kit. So we're just getting that kind of pushed through, and then that's just going to sit there. And then take a look at your case, and you're going to kind of see, okay, it assembles just like this on here. So we're going to flip the case just like that, and we're going to take our LED kit and start getting it to how we want it. Now, if you have it just the way we made it, where it's 5 LEDs that are individual cut ones, and it's 8mm LED strips, then it's going to be like this. You're going to be able to mount each one. Okay, I had to cut there for a second. My dog decided to start barking. So we were talking about getting this LED strip and putting it in there. If you have a different type of LEDs that are bigger, or they were only in sections of 3, so you had to have 6 LEDs here, you're going to have to be a lot more careful how you mount these, because you're going to run into your supports here, and you really can't cut these out, because you really need these for the hard drive. That's one of the main positioning supports for the HDD itself, so I would not make any further modifications than what we've done. You can slide it a little bit more to the front, but that's exactly why I really suggest you get these type of LEDs so that we can get it to fit in there properly. So to get started, what we're going to do is we kind of get our position kind of basically put in here so we know where we want it. And we're going to get our glue gun, and we're going to put 2 big globs of glue right where the connectors themselves are, kind of off the plexiglass as well. And you want 2 nice sized globs. And then we're just going to stick that in there and hold it for just a few seconds. Now that's in position a little bit, we're going to take and put another dot kind of in the middle. Just be careful, don't get any glue on the plexiglass here that's showing. You just want to take your time, get a little piece in there. If you do accidentally get glue that goes past, you can remove it, but do not try to remove it until the glue has completely cooled and completely hardened. If you try to mess with it, like if that glue went like way up in here or something, just let it cool for a good 15-20 minutes to make sure it's totally hardened. and then you can use either a razor blade or some sort of knife, and you can just lightly cut it close by, and then you should be able to just pop it right off. Okay, so then leaving the wire out, we're not going to worry about that sticking out yet. We'll deal with that. We're going to get this side in, and we're just going to do the same thing. Because it's only one connector, we're going to put one big glob where that one is. Again, like I said, I got a little like string of glue going right here, but I'm going to be able to get that out once it cools off. Because if you do it while it's still hot, the glue is actually going to smear instead of come off. Whereas when it's hard like that, you're going to be able to just kind of chop it right off of there and just peel it right off, and you won't leave any residue. Okay, I wanted to let that sit for just a few seconds, so I cut the camera again there. Just enough to let that get good and hardened up. There was a few little places where my knife kind of hit the glue. I trimmed those out a little bit. We're going to put another dot of glue here on the end, and then we'll put one in the middle. Okay, so I've given this some more time. All this is set real nice and had about 15 minutes to cool off fully. What we're going to do is we're going to get our wire and get that nice and hidden and out of the way. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start taking it in here. Hopefully, if you got the plexiglass kind of like the tutorial, you should have a little bit of space right here. And so what we can do is we can actually pack our wire and then twist it and fold it back into itself. So we're kind of putting it into like a little coil, I guess is a good way to put it. As you can see, it's kind of like fixed in there, and it's kind of wedged in between the case and the glass. And then we'll just put a nice glob of glue on it. Not put too much. Again, you don't want it to go into the plexiglass, but nice so that it can go down in there. If you notice the wires start turning, you can use something like a little screwdriver like this. You don't want to stick your fingers directly in that hot glue, of course. So what we're going to do now is, while that's finishing with the cooling process and stuff like that, we're going to take this back out. We're going to get our button and spring mechanism put back in. So the problem with these is you can put the arm the wrong way, so you want to make sure that it's lining up. If you go to put this back in and it feels like it's not lining up correctly, which it's gonna, the spring has to get pulled out just a little bit anyways. Yep. Okay, there we go. But if it was flipped over the other way, it wouldn't want to fit in there right. It needs to be like this bezel right here where it goes down needs to face in this direction. If it was flipped over, the bezel would be underneath and it would be flat on top. If that's the case, you've got it in there backwards. Then you can just pop the button in. Now, just be careful. This can and probably will pop out on us a couple times while we're putting this together. So just keep your eye on that and grab it if it pops out. And then we're going to get our hard drive, and remember that it goes this way. And then we're going to take our cord and go ahead and get it plugged in. Kind of set that right here. Going to get our little rubber seal back in place. And then we're going to get the back of the hard drive lined up here so that it's properly sitting properly in there. I said seated. And remember that this goes like this. So we want to also get our wires and kind of turn them and get them so they're good and like so they're going to pack in there really good once we get it closed all together. Same thing with this wire for the LEDs. We can kind of twist that, kind of get it underneath a little bit better just to get it out of the way. You just want this to be as put together now as possible, because we've got to kind of flip this over on top of this, because the button will fall out if we did it the other way around. So we've got to now take this and flip it. So what we're going to do is hold this as best you can and hold the hard drive in place, and we're going to flip it, try to get the plug lined up with the hole, kind of set it down on there as best we can. Okay, if your hard drive has come back any, you might need to slide it up a little more so that it's properly sitting on those supports on here on the back that we set them on when we first did it. That way it's at least like this. It's at least able to be flat. So what we got to do is there are two clamps that kind of, you can see there's like a slot here, and there's like a, oops, I want my button almost again. Right here on this part of the top, there's a part that goes out and into that little slot. So we got to kind of push it in there while pushing this and kind of pushing it back so that it can go over it. And then you'll hear it click and set in there. Now we should be mostly pretty flat right now. You might still see a little bit of a gap here, but that's okay. If you're not, like here with this one, this seal has moved a little bit, so you can kind of adjust it. If it's really bad, you can take a flat head, but you can see there's like a little, I don't know what you would call that, a raised area that lines up perfectly. You just want to get that so it's pulled perfectly in the middle. And then what we're going to do is, while holding all this together, get a couple of the screws started. And then we're going to get our T6 screwdriver. We're going to go ahead. Don't tighten them too tight. A, the plastic can break. And B, we're just kind of checking it out, making sure everything looks good. But really what we're doing is we're just making sure, it's still going to be a little open because we haven't fully closed it yet, but you want to make sure this is totally flat right here. If you got an area that's bulging out, more than likely your connectors, those red connectors we used, probably fell out of place a little bit. So you need to kind of open it back up and repack those in there before you flipped it together. And then just try to keep those in place as best you can when you flip it over and get it together. That's usually going to create a big bulge right here, or it's going to make this connector not want to get in there right. It's just kind of a trial and error thing. It might take you a couple times to get it put together. But once you've got it good, you're going to put all your screws back. You should have it. If you see any little tiny bulges, it's not a big deal because you do have that metal shielding that used to be in here that's no longer there. And some of that was attached to the adhesive backing of those. So you're going to have a little pieces that are just a tiny bit looser, but it should still look like this. You shouldn't have something where it's like, bulging out like this or something crazy. If it's bulging out like that, it's not going to connect right or sit right. So you've got some sort of wire or something in here that's gotten out of whack that you need to repack and flip back over again. Your last thing to keep in mind is when you're installing this, I don't know what it is about after you've opened these, even if you don't make any modifications to them, these just get a little more loose and out of place. So when you go to actually put this in the console, and if it doesn't want to sit right the first time, you can kind of like twist it or push it up or down to line it up properly, and then you can get it in there. That first time after you've put it together, sometimes it'll just be a little bit out of place. But what we're going to do is we're going to get our console and do a final test, make sure everything is good. And actually this one lined up perfectly because it's going right in there. So see the button engaged. You also want to kind of pull on the hard drive outwards because that'll let you know that the button is properly working and it's kind of clicked in there so it's not loose. So we know that our assembly is good. Now we're going to plug it in. And there we go. Turn it on and look at that. LEDs are working good. If you look at it from an angle, you can make sure both strips on each side. So if you kind of flip it and then flip it, you'll be able to make sure both strips are working. But as you can see, it's not too bad, especially with the light on. Those lights are still pretty bright. That's why I use the ones that I use in these kits, because they get the most out of that 5-volt source. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. So anyways, that's all I've really got for you, and I hope the project went well. But until next time, guys, bye.